room will open at 1:45 today for those who need it. Leader, 1:45.
But 2 o'clock.
So.
All right, nothing really to report differently from the injury report. It was the same as it was yesterday. We'll open it up for questions.
John, did you guys, I remember you reflecting on the way the defense ended last season a couple times earlier this year about saying that, the defense didn't maintain that level all the way through the end. And obviously you come off a game only allowing 7 points on Sunday. What do you look for to be different as you guys finish out here defensively to make sure that there is no drop off you guys are sprinting through the finish line?
Again, it's hard to even remember the end of last season, but, I remember the last game in Minnesota. We didn't play particularly well, in my opinion, really not just on defense as a football team. So that's really kind of my recollection, the last quarter a year ago. The game against Detroit, I know, was in that last quarter a year ago. It was a 17-20 game where we had the ball at the end, with a chance, had a couple penalties. Talked to the officiating department today about that. Or actually, our last 2 trips to Detroit have been interesting that way. Really exactly last year and how we ended up defensively or not, I think we've ended up about 15th last year, which was, okay for what we ended up the season with. I just think we're probably a little bit better right now and get a good test against a good Detroit team, still fighting for a playoff spot at their place.
Is there any common reason why your last 2 Detroit trips have had maybe some group of thoughts?
No, I think, I don't know, I remember it like it was yesterday, but the reversal, I think the original call was a touchback and they reversed it to a touchdown, and then there was a particular roughing the passer call and a critical play that I thought had some bearing. And then last year we had 2 holding penalties in the last 59 seconds of the game.
On the Brady catch, right?
Actually 2 catches in a row. I don't remember which one was which.
So when you talk to the officiating department, is it just, hey, keep an eye on this? Or
I really wouldn't want to go into the exact verbiage, but something along those lines.
With regard to defense, especially lately, what impact has Trevathan's return made? What difference has that made for you?
Well, it's huge. I think, you go back to, I think we strung a couple together where, we had both Leonard and Danny out there at once. And, come to mind a little bit the Baltimore game and then backed up with the Carolina game. I thought, those were pretty impressive defensive performances. Again, we haven't, we lost Leonard, and then Danny coming back obviously did help us, but I think the last couple of weeks, it definitely makes us better.
Is there something that's beyond the tackles? Obviously, this is your leading tackle. Is there something about the communication or just his presence or something that just makes things work better? Or?
All of those things. I think, Danny's guy's been there before. I think he understands, how the game needs to be played, and that rallying, for the guy next to you, I think is pretty big, and he ignites that.
Who have you coached over the years that's gotten the same kind of attention that Cohen has?
Oh, shoot, a lot of guys. Steve Smith, on the defensive side, Julius Peppers, Von Miller, Demaryius Thomas. As far as creating doubles and one guy is hard for them to handle, whether it's a defensive player and they have to try to protect against him, or then offensively a receiver that you're not going to probably be able to handle one-on-one.
You're naming superstars. Those guys. I mean, those guys were all Pro Bowlers.
Yeah,
that's a fair.
That's what you try to get.
Yeah. No, but I mean, Cohen's a rookie that I'm not sure.
Well, I think it's early. I don't know. I don't like trying to define guys anytime, but he's an explosive guy. That's a tough matchup, and we have to contend with those on our opponents, and then they have to contend with some guys on our team, and I'd say he's probably one of them. They'd have to answer that for you, but I would imagine. Okay, thank you.
Is there an area of Tariq Cohen's game as a punt returner that you feel like has really improved enough to single out as an area that you really like the progress he's made as a punter?
Well, one single area, I think he's learned more about the situational part of things. There's some risks that he took earlier on in the season. I think he's learned when and where to do that. Last week I thought he showed a little bit of maturity in the second punt, the one that hit the ground that he picked off the ground. He took a peek at the gunner, and when he looked back up, he kind of lost it. And he realized, hey, I'm not going to put myself in a bad situation. Okay, let's let this thing bounce. If I got space, I'll go ahead and take this. Things like that, with plus 50, there's more conversations that go on the sideline, about, hey, here's where we're at in this game, and a lot of times he's bringing those things to me.
He was critical of himself immediately after the game, say he was passive on a couple. Did you sense that from him in the game in a couple instances?
I thought he could have caught the first one, and he didn't like it. Their guy was down the field. The guy who got flagged for going out of bounds, he stayed out of bounds for a while, and as a corner, as a safety outside trying to hold that guy up, if he's out of bounds, you can't hit him. And so that guy was down the field a little bit further than what we kind of expected based off of that action. And so he didn't want it. He did a good job communicating that, and live to fight another day.
As a special teams coordinator, how do you appreciate how Devin Hester kind of changed kickoffs in the NFL?
I'd say change the game, both kickoffs and punts. He's the best that's ever done it. Elite skill set. I never had a chance to coach him. I was across the sideline several times, and you're holding your breath. I mean, there's been nobody like him in my generation. He was really the first guy that you really game plan for, and you saw different people take different approaches. You see people try and punt the ball out of bounds. Well, defenses can combat that, with some of the rush schemes, so you may have to change that. You saw people get into the try and kick fair catch balls and short, because the reality is if you played Chicago when he was rolling and you came out of the game with a 35, 36 net, which isn't great, but against him, you're usually taking that every time. So he's as good as it gets.
What was the strategy you took against him?
Different strategies. There was a game we played in Carolina where we were going to try and change it up, and we tried to punt the ball out of bounds, and our punter put the ball about 4 inches from the sideline. He reached in and got it and shot, straight up the sideline. In Denver, we tried to hang it up there, did a good job in the first couple. Actually, the best ball that our punter hit that day, that was the 2011 game, the best ball our punter hit that day with hang time and distance, he kind of circled around, went backwards, sideline, all of a sudden he turned the corner, and you're holding your breath. We were able to get him on the ground, but he's a game changer.
Tariq said last week that he watched some of his film and, Devin on Madden and whatever, but because Hester was so unique, what can a young guy like Tariq pick up from just watching him?
Yeah, I think that his return style was unique. Devin Hester's was, and his ability to set up blocks in the open field while still being able to move and change the angles of people. What I noticed watching him return, it always seemed like he was never looking at the guy that was in front of him. He was one block ahead. He knew how he was going to make this guy miss. He was trying to make the next guy miss and set up his blocks. He had kind of a hesitation speed deal where it always seemed like he was moving about 80%, but when he put it into that final gear, he had a real ability to squeeze through some spaces that didn't look like he could. And, you know, as a young returner, some of those evasive maneuvers, I think, are things that can be learned, even if you don't have an identical skill set. But some of those traits, certainly with speed and quickness, Tariq's in the conversation, the same genre type of thing. He's not a power returner, more of an evasive, elusive type guy.
At the end of the first half, or what was your magic number to get to from Nugent, and how much did it help that, you know, he knows the stadium, he knows the environment, he knows probably the weather, that sort of stuff?
Yeah, I wouldn't want to say what the magic number was. We didn't achieve it. We got close once they roughed Trubisky. Yeah, well, I think the ball was at 37. You know, now we're 8 yards back, so that's 55. Yeah, he's got a good understanding of what the conditions are in that stadium and where his distance would be. So we weren't there at that point, and yeah, I mean, it helps. Familiarity helps in different situations.
Jeff, when you look at Pat O'Donnell's season, what are some of the things you like, numbers or things that you'd look at to evaluate how he is and maybe stacks up against the rest of the league?
Yeah, I try to stay as much as I can away from the numbers and just trying to evaluate the tape. And because the numbers, the results have more to do with the whole group than just the punter. And, you know, we ask him to do different things based off of, you know, who we're playing, what that returner is, who we have covering in those situations. The clock and quarter, you know, I think he's grown as a punter. You know, every year, every quarter of every season, you know, kind of put more on his plate, and you know, he's really had a solid season this year. I think his plus 50 stuff has been pretty good. His minus 50 stuff, you know, he said some games he'd like to have back, but I think he's been on an upward trend for most of the season. You know, you'd expect that to continue. I mean, young punters, it just takes them a minute to kind of figure things out, and he's doing that, you know, throughout the season.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
How you guys doing?
Okay.
What stood out to you about the game Sunday, only 7 points allowed?
Well, we had a better day on third down, you know, which is kind of where you have to start in comparison to the recent weeks. I think that was a big part of it. I thought we played well over. I thought we had tight coverage when we needed it, tighter than it had been in recent weeks, and that paid off too.
Eddie, with the play on Green to take the ball away, just his bounce back maybe game on Sunday, what did you see from him?
Yeah, that's kind of what I've been saying here. I like the guy's maturity, his ability to bounce back from a bad play, a bad series, or a subpar game is good. And he's a mature player, and expect that from him.
I think, like, physicalness was one of the dings on him coming out of Alabama, but that play, to have the physicalness to strip the ball away from a pretty physical wide receiver, what does that tell you about him?
Well, he's a good, you know, he's got good football instincts. That's a good football play, you know, to have the awareness that, hey, the tackle secure, to rip that ball out and stay in bounds. You know, there's a lot of things that went on in that play that he was aware of. And he's an instinctive player, which I think was shown there on several levels.
Vic, Lamar Houston has a sack in each of the 2 games since coming back. What's impressed you about him since returning?
Well, he's been able to retain a lot of the stuff, you know, that we do from when he left here after training camp. So that's been good. And, you know, he's been playing about like we would expect.
In that first meeting, what did you guys do well? I think you held them only to what, 65 yards on the ground as well. What looking back now?
You know, we played the run pretty good in that game. You know, but ended up giving up, you know, a couple points too many there at the end. But I thought we played the run well. These guys do run the ball. I know statistically it doesn't show that they do it well, but they do stay with it, and they have backs that can break it. So they're capable of getting the 20, 30-yard run if you're not on point.
Talked a lot about
Matt Stafford in the late game situations.
Say that again?
What stands out to you about Stafford in some of the late game situations where he's consistently had some success?
Well, he's got great talent, number one. You know, he's very accurate. He's got great arm talent. He can put the ball on the money with good speed and anticipation. Puts it in the right spots. You know, and it just shows his experience in those situations that he knows when to take maybe a little extra chance or when it's got to be thrown in there tighter and on time and on rhythm. You know, he's a very impressive quarterback, and you can see why they gave him all that money.
We've talked a lot about Danny being so valuable, and over the last couple of weeks, he's really showed that. Has it meant more because you've been so shorthanded?
Well, sure. I mean, as many good players as you can put out there, you know, you need, and he's certainly one of our better players. And, you know, we missed him when he was out those 4 games or whatever it was. And he's picked back up here lately and playing good for us. And I think he does provide some leadership.
In that regard, I guess with some specific, besides tackles, is there some difference that Trevathan makes on your defense? I mean, is there some other effect he has? Or
Well, he's fast. He's got more range than our other ILBs, you know, as far as getting to plays and closing speed to go make a play. That, you know, when somebody else doesn't make it, you don't think they should, but he can. And I think that's one of the bigger things.
Kwiatkowski, a busier day out there, certainly playing time. Was that a matchup thing? Was that with Christian moving outside?
That was with Christian moving outside.
What did you like about Nick's game?
I thought he did fine. You know, they didn't run the ball a whole lot numbers-wise. And again, that's part of getting off the field on 3rd down and our offense making some first downs. So it was kind of a different game than what we've been used to seeing. I thought he played well in all areas.
You mentioned a few times earlier this season that you weren't pleased with the way you guys finished a year ago.
Correct.
And I'm curious, you know, to have a 7-point game in December here, what are you insisting on is better this time as you guys finish out? What do you need to do to make sure that standard is?
We just, you know, make them aware of it. You know, we've played with good effort, toughness, intensity all year, and we want to continue that. And, you know, we've talked about it, and, you know, we've got some tough foes coming up here. Obviously, going to Detroit and Stafford and that offense is a very tough assignment, but I think we'll be ready.
Kyle Fuller appears to be having an excellent season. The one repeated issue has been holding on to interceptions. Can that be fixed? How do you go about addressing that?
I think Kyle's actually got good hands, but he has had a few that he's had a chance at that he hadn't been able to finish, like the one the other day. You know, the guy kind of got his hand in there late and broke it up on him. He had one in the first Detroit game. He's had, I don't know, 4 or 5 of them that he hadn't quite been able to finish. I think he's got good hands. So, you know, if he keeps doing that, I think he'll hold on to a couple of them.
Why do you insist he has good hands if he's not putting them in?
Well, they haven't been, you know, just thrown right there and he clanks it and drops it. You know, they've had some toughness to it, and sometimes the receiver has turned into the defender on him and knocked it out, and he's had the tussle for the ball. So, but I base that on watching him in practice.
We're heading to the home stretch, and, you know, who knows what the future holds for anybody, but how desirous are you to kind of see this thing through on defense? I mean, you've built from below ground to above ground. How eager are you to kind of see this thing through, you know, long term and build and max out with a defense that seems like it has some potential?
You know, definitely interested in that.
And anything in particular that makes you feel that way? I mean,
Well, I like the guys we're working with, players. They're really a good bunch of guys. My favorite part of the day is getting up in front of them and, you know, watching tape with them or putting in the defenses for the week. And I enjoy being around these guys. They're really a good bunch of guys.
And are you satisfied with is the growth part of it that you've seen so far? I know injuries have been a factor, but I mean, as far as the growth.
I think we've had growth. Obviously, not in the leaps and bounds that you need, you know, as evidenced by our record. But there has been growth.
On the Eddie's interception, what did you like about the way Bryce played that?
Yeah, he got his hand in there and helped tipped it, which is obviously a very contributing factor. If he doesn't tip it, there's no interception. So, you know, Bryce gets credit for a caused interception there, which is important.
I think if you could add one more piece, big time pass rusher, run stuffer, big hitter, defender, what would be your greatest need? And what's that one piece you'd like to have most?
I don't want to say, really. That's a better question for Ryan. But all the above.
Any kind of comments, Brett, with your success against the AFC North?
I don't think so. You know, those games have been spread out. I think it's just a coincidence more than anything else.
Anything else?
All right, guys.
Thank you.